Aloha. This video I want to go over what what people are calling mud floods. Some people have been asking me to mention this or speak on this for a while now, a few weeks, probably longer than that. But I didn't have any real kind of like drive to look or really put too much energy in this, because to me automatically it was just another Mandela effect. It was just another like mainstream version, like the mainstream version of flat earth. It was just another simulation theory. It was just another thing that was happening. It was another what? That was the main thing. And when I was watching all of these mud flood videos, that was the main thing that came to mind was, here's another what that's out here in the consciousness that's taking away from people going into the depths of how and why these things happen. So since this is a truth that is focused mostly on, before I go any further, the images that you're looking at and what mud floods are, you can research them yourself if you hadn't heard about it anymore at all. There's evidence, obvious evidence, that has been in our history floods of mud, like that have come through in certain areas at certain times, and it looks purposeful to some people. Like, that's what it really boils down to. Mud floods in certain areas at certain times, maybe all at the same time at once at certain times, kind of like reset buttons. That's basically what it boils down to. So you see the images that you're looking at now are people are showing evidence of buildings that were built and then looking like evidence of a mud flood coming through, and having these first floors and first floors of these buildings being buried. And then the next civilization or the next people is just building on top of that, or the survivors or whoever. They just built stairways up to the second floor, and then they just went about their lives. So there's a lot of different angles that are involved in this. Like some of these buildings have antennas on them, so people are talking about like ancient civilizations that were like advanced civilizations. First of all, before I go any further, antennas on top of buildings do not there is not a proof of an advanced civilization, period. It's more advanced than the fucked up history that we've been told is our history. Obviously, they've been jacking with the history with putting Edison out there instead of Tesla, hiding science, hiding inventions, hiding cures, hiding this, hiding that. That's already known. This is a known truth. We know that the deceivers of this world do not give a shit about the people, and they will do anything, or it will do anything to deceive you. So jumping straight from, okay, yeah, is it interesting that there are antennas on these old ass buildings? Obviously, it's interesting. I would like to know more about it. Maybe they had beyond that, this is what it'll all boil down to. This whole video, this will always go back to the consciousness of what, how, and why. Keep that in mind, because I've spoken on this in previous videos many a times. What consciousness is mud floods? What consciousness is the antennas on top of old ass buildings? It's distraction consciousness within the what field, and also the who field, because one thing that I forgot to mention in those three, the what, the how, and the why, is the who. And the who consciousness exists before the what. It's on the lower, it's like the ground level. Then you got level 1, level 2, level 3. It's like buildings, not like levels of consciousness. Ground level is who? Like a baby or a child who just follows an older child or follows an adult because they are mimicking what they need to do to be a successful adult or a successful older child. So that's the ground level. Who consciousness. The ground level consciousness of who is what is the main consciousness of the entire world right now. We are following who. This is why we are following who. We're following who because you're following who. A person, like an identity that has told you that the world is a globe and we live in a heliocentric universe. That is to personify it, just to understand what I'm talking about, because we know it's an illusion. It came from an individual, in a sense, like an individual who consciousness. It's not the truth. It was an artificial invention by an artificial consciousness at best, like a consciousness that is not artificial but is has like the max of malevolent tendencies to control and destroy people and have zero amount of like natural life force energy or soul energy in it at all. Maybe it's an artificial intelligence that is completely disconnected to all of the cycles of life that we're talking about here. And this is why it's so easy for me to go back to like, who the hell cares about, mud floods? Obviously it's a thing, and I'm thinking of it as like an ancient indigenous person, and this happening. Like if this was happening on my land back in, however many, 5, 6, 7, 2,000 years ago, if I'm just chilling down in West Oakland and I see a mud flood coming down off the Oakland Hills, I'm gonna be like, hey, what the fuck is, hey, we gotta get out the way if it's coming towards us. If it's not coming towards us, then it's just a natural event that's going on. And then we're just gonna go about our business. Where it comes into, we have these secret society people who are manipulating the weather, and now it's liquefaction, and they've created these mud floods so they can create and build their new world order and all that other shit. That's where I can't go to where we're giving too much power to the so-called powers that be. Now, I am on board with the idea that they have weather modification capabilities to a certain degree, though. To a certain degree, we have to be very careful about what we're doing when we're throwing around these ideas without really vetting them to the depths of our perceptions of like the capabilities of these parasites, pretty much, and period, in this realm overall. Like, okay, I will entertain that the so-called powers that be have the capacity to do mud floods and so on, and they've had that for so long. I will entertain that, but I can only entertain that to the smallest of a percentage, because the biggest percentage that exists in my intuition is mud floods are nothing more than like, they're no different than a water flood. They're no different than a natural weather event that's happening that is basically there's no any way to comprehend like what kind of things, like natural events like that happen. From our perspective at this point. Maybe in the future at some time we'll know like the cycles and what's going on, and this is connected to this realm overall, possibly. Maybe that's why they had to cover up all this stuff. But then again, we're still talking about, like, I always want to go back to the relationship with that so-called man has with this reality overall. When I'm watching these mud flood videos, I'm hearing a lot of people talk about, the new world order and the so-called powers that be that have, done something to them, that have created this mud flood so they can do what? And I don't see it that way, because I don't think we should be living in these fucking cities in the first place. In fact, this city ass living is a representation of the new world mentality. So when people talk about the new world order, who the fuck are you really talking about? You ain't talking, are you talking about us, like us as the indigenous people who were existing before Christopher Columbus and the new world mentality even showed up? No, you're talking about a mud flood that happened in like the 1820s or some shit like that. This is where I'm talking about, where people get distracted by the what consciousness because they don't want to go into the depths of changing themselves. Once you start going into the depths of changing themselves in a sense of looking at yourself, once you start going into the depths of looking at yourself in a relation to society as a whole, history as a whole, the relationship to nature as a whole, people, mentalities, consciousness as a whole. A lot of these distractions are put out there in the so-called truth community. We're flooded with a lot of this truth because we are trying to be like, they are attempting to distract us. It is attempting to suck your time, to steal your time. You have to see SpaceX shooting a fucking rocket with a sports car and a spaceman into it around the sun, around Mars, smack dab in the center of a flat earth, so-called not heliocentric realization is not a fucking coincidence. It's a manipulation of your time, a manipulation of your consciousness. It's keeping you trapped in the what consciousness at best, because most of this shit is who? Even this mud flood shit. Here we are over 3 years into the modern flat earth information stream. And now we have this new thing that's coming up. The same thing with like the giant trees and the no trees on flat Earth, or no forest on flat Earth. So we have this is the next new thing, like the next Mandela effect, and the Mandela effect is like it's one of its own things. It's like, ooh, here's a new one, and people who have looked into the Mandela effect know what I'm talking about, because you realize what the Mandela effect is to your capabilities, to your consciousness. Like, you see it from there. Just like everybody sees everything from their level of consciousness. Point being is that once, if you're on a roll, given a whole group of this, say there's 500 of us living in one community, and we're researching stuff, and there's like a crew of people, like a faction of people living around the world, and they're the majority, and they want to control like what you study. They want to control how you evolve. They want to control what you know about them. They want to control what you know about this realm that they live in. They want to control how you change. They want to control what you know about yourself. All of that is being manipulated, and you are only you, like trying to research and do all this other stuff with 500 other yous trying to research this stuff. Meanwhile, you have, the only way you can research this stuff is by accessing the information that is available by the internet created by the faction. So you're accessing your truth through the information fed to you by the individuals who don't want you to know your truth. So all of these, in order to keep you from knowing that and keep you interested in thinking that you're changing and evolving and becoming like more aware and getting stronger against so-called them, then they're going to keep manipulating the information to make it seem like once something's going on, like you're having a hallucination of evolution. That's what being stuck in one version of consciousness is. The what and the who consciousness. You're getting older, but you're not getting wiser. This is like the difference between just old heads and like elders. Like, you can be old, but you just old ass man child. That's what's going on with a lot of people now. People ain't wise anymore on purpose because we have nothing to be wise about. We only have a bunch of whats that have been given to us by the people, the mentalities that don't know us to want to know jack shit anyway. So this goes back to, like I've always been saying, what is the whole point? Like, when is it going to get to a point to people realizing their responsibility of starting to find out what is true? See, the mud floods is another example of what I've been saying in the recent videos. This kind of truth is the lie truth. This is hey, we've been lied to about this reality. So it's an introduction to a truth, but the focus of this truth is based upon what? The lie. It's based upon the who lied to you, the what that who was doing when they lied to you. So you're still reacting. You're still basing all your shit on this. And like the highest thing that I see on this, since we're just, throwing, because that's what's happening right now when they're talking about truths like this, mud floods and all this other stuff. You're really just theorizing about what's going on. So on the highest theory that I have, like from a spiritual perspective, because there's psychological, spiritual, and physical perspectives that are all reflective of the same, but just for observation purposes, like I just wanted to lay that out and also give this extreme of like what these mud floods could be. What is a natural hurricane? What is a natural volcano? What is a natural earthquake? What is a natural, disaster? What is a flood, tsunami, all this other stuff? It's a reset of some sort. Does it necessarily have to be a benevolent or a malevolent energy behind that? Why do we have to attach anything to that? Who the fuck, like how arrogant of us. 3/4 of this fucking place is water anyway. So how arrogant of us to think like, oh, well, this is like, so I don't automatically personalize it like that. Cause like I said, if it was just us back in 2,000 years chilling on the water out here in West Oakland, catching fish and eating oysters and clams and shit, what? And this mud flood comes down the hill. We don't have this connection to the material realm like that. We don't give a fuck about what's going to let it do its thing. If there's some kind of malevolent energy or intellect behind that, why is that going to bother us anyway? Until they start invading our land and doing that and doing all the others, and these mud floods could be that now going out from what I was talking about in the beginning, going into the intention part. If that's the intention, hey, we're going to see them when we see them. So this always boils down to you having the responsibility to take care of yourself, to grow your own food, to make your own clothes, to secure your own community, to create your own or to build off of your ancestors' understandings and overstandings of this realm and what's going on. Food, clothing, shelter, your connection with the Most High, and your relationship with, everything that's going on in each other. So now you have invaders. You have this consciousness that has disconnected itself from nature. And now it wants to attack those who are still connected to nature. This is what I say it's always boiling down to. Because who gives a fuck about how these disconnected with nature people or entities get what they want? It's happening. Because if you get caught up in that, you start becoming reactive. But if you stay grounded in your realization that this is a war between the entities that are disconnected from nature or disconnected from spirit, and the people or the beings who against the people and the beings and the existence that is still somehow connected to the Most High, somehow more connected consciously in some kind of way. For example, I'm just spitballing now, to the Most High for some kind of particular reason. The individuals or the beings or the entities who have disconnected themselves from the Most High have done it for their own reasons, their own kind of selfish, trying to live at the expense of others sort of mentality. So this is what we're experiencing now. And one of their main mechanisms for continuing on with their program is to distract you with information, to even now distract you with so-called truth. So this is just this is the truthful version of what's happening in the mainstream media when you get information coming out of the History Channel about ancient aliens. When you get information coming out of the Discovery Channel about simulation theory and going to Mars and the Big Bang and gravity and all that other bullshit. See, that's the flip side. That's the deception side of distraction. This is the truthful side of distraction. Mud floods and all this other, a Mandela effect, simulation theory, that's a truthful side of distraction, of deception. Because overall, what happens in both of those events is you do not activate yourself from your own responsibility, from your ancestral responsibility, from your power center that doesn't come from reacting to these power, like bogus ass, weak ass entities that are doing whatever they're doing. Who gives a fuck? Whatever they're doing, it's still based upon this material ass realm. Look at these people are all disappointed about their colonial buildings. Oh my God, we have an advanced civilization that was destroyed. See, we're just like the pyramids too. Like we're just like the people. Our ancient civilization, which was destroyed too. That's what I'm seeing here too, because there is evidence that there was some like a mud or a sand flood, some kind of liquefaction flood in Egypt and in Mexico too. When I went down to Mexico and Teotihuacan, walking around Mexico City, there's these old buildings that are really kind of like in the same kind of thing in France, or not France, Italy. When I went to Italy, there's these entire buildings that are underneath the street level. And I'm just like, okay, well, wow, that's kind of, that automatically made me think about what was going on in, like how the buildings are built on top of water and all that other stuff in Venice and so on and so forth. So I'm thinking like, oh, okay, this makes kind of sense. Obviously, I'm thinking about like the underground tunnels and civilizations that people have talked about living in and building now, underground tunnels and all that other stuff. I was thinking about all that other stuff, but like I said, where does that stuff live? What realm of consciousness does that stuff live? It's in Distractionville. It's in the what and the who consciousness. And yeah, you can make a cool, YouTube video like No Force on Flat Earth. It's very interesting, very, it makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, to what extent? What degree? Like what is the intention here? So with the Mandela effect, now people are saying people are talking about these reality things and see, what this really boils down to is a fake ass, I don't want to say fake, but I want to say like 99th percentile of fake, because I don't like using that word in reference to this right now. It's just like a kindergarten version. It pisses me off to some degree a lot of the times. The arrogance and the pride is kind of like, it's the same thing. It's kind of like this being proud of the American dream. It's the same thing. That's like what being proud of this modern truth community is. And you have these arrogant ass truthers out there that are talking about like, oh yeah, we have an awareness of quantum mechanics and quantum physics and simulation theory and all this other bullshit. But it's all just, it's stuff. It's still stuff. And like that one dude, Quantum of Conscious, calls, like they boil down their relationship to spirit to something that's called like soul tokens. Look at the fuck, like they want to do, so they're doing, it's like, it's kind of like people who donate money because it's a good thing, or they donate time, or they donate, like, they think of all the shit that's going on in the world, all the best thing that they could do is just give money to some kind of organization, and that's their good deed for humanity. See, that's that colonized reactionary mentality, that modern kind of mentality that is part of being separated from nature, is part of being separated from spirit. It's the artificial version of connecting to the spirit or the Most High. An artificial version of connecting to yourself. Like, what the fuck is a soul token? Like, you just downgraded the whole definition of what the soul is by placing it next to something called a fucking token. A token? What the fuck is a soul token? Like, this shit is ridiculous. But this is how these people think. Like, maybe they're like robot consciousness trying to be more organic, and they don't know how to actually comprehend this natural world. Maybe they have no real capacity to really connect to nature, so they only can connect to something that is artificial. Maybe that's the only possibility with these kinds of individuals. But it's possible, man. It's something, maybe something's going on with the hardware program of these bodies, or even the software program of these experiences that says, hey, you're only capable of comprehending this to this degree until you accomplish this thing, and then you'll be able to go further and further and further. But overall, based upon your hardware, you are only capable of comprehending these things this way, this type of way. Because there are people who have a tendency, a predisposition, like we are told we have a predisposition to, like we were told, black people have a predisposition for being violent and lazy and all that other shit, man. See all that shit that existed out there? But that was just to hide that. For this example purpose, because this is another theory that's existing out there that is not anchored in just kind of only theories. No, there is factual evidence for this shit, that the so-called European individual, or the lighter skinned human, has a predisposition to violent actions, to war type mentalities, to conquering based mentalities. This is why they created this monkey evolution, animalistic sort of mentality for the definition of all humanity, to water everybody down, to water all. Just imagine if the human potential was really way beyond, like into the spiritual sciences and spiritual technologies. It was way over that. And maybe that's why the people in Machu Picchu, the priests out there, built Machu Picchu all the way up on top of a fucking mountain. Maybe that's why they built that shit up there, to last forever, and to let people know that this consciousness was always here, and it will never die. So it will never be flooded out. It will be at the top, the highest mountain. So, like, there's all these things that exist out here that give us examples of, you know, these things that have happened. But there are solid truths out there, like the psychological truth of the predisposition to war and conquering. Like, we don't talk about that fucking truth out here in the so-called truth community. We're interested in externalizing this. We don't want to personalize it, because if you personalize it, that focuses on the change. This is why I'm saying this is kind of like this artificial, this is what I'm calling the artificial truth community now. The artificial, because this internet truth community is an artificial truth community. The real truth community is when you sit down around, you know, all your friends, is when you can walk around in your city and talk about your truth. That's the real truth community. Because this is these truthers in this so-called truth community that they walk around. See, I can walk around people around my hometown, and I can get deep into a so-called truthful conversation, and that shit'll just be regular talk for us. But for people who have been living in this modern colonial world where this is like taboo, like, ooh, we can't talk about this. See, the original people can talk about this. This is not some secret shit. We've already been knowing about this. Did you ask the indigenous people about what they thought the mud floods were? Do they have any information about this? Like, I'm sure there is some information about what this is or what's going on. But no, this automatically gets tacked into the New World Order has the power to do this and da 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 da. Okay, that's one world. Let's say that's one version of consciousness. Like I said, the other version of consciousness is, or one other, because there's multiple, there's many different ones that are pertaining to what's going on here. But you got the Most High, who could have been like, man, fuck, these fucking parasites are taking all this shit, man, fuck all this. Boom, mud flood. Boom, water flood. Boom, volcanoes, hurricane. We'll take this shit, y'all gonna have to start over. Y'all gonna get the point one way or another. Reconnect with nature or give the shit up. Like, I can't actually, take y'all out, but I will adjust the nature of this realm to fuck with y'all so y'all can get the point. Some people are gonna get the point. Other people are not gonna get the point. The parasites are not gonna get the point. Like the extreme ones, and they're just gonna rebuild their buildings with their antennas and all that other bullshit, and they go about their business. They're never gonna really do anything about it. So that's what I'm thinking. This is my theory of mud floods that's going on with like all these civilization, because that's where I center it from. I center it from the Most High. I don't give a fuck about these New World Order, whatever parrots, or whatever you want to label the consciousness of malevolent energy that is disconnecting from nature. I don't care what the fuck you want to name it. I want to focus on what's going on with the actual shit. Like our responsibility. That's when the real shit is, when you focus on your responsibility to change the entire situation of your main scope, your circle. So get your people food, clothing, shelter. Get your people knowledgeable about who and what they are. And anybody who wants to keep you away from that, keep them away from you. This is why I'm straying away from this truther community. This is why I've been straying away. I've never been really a part of any labels like that. And that's why I say people have to think about this too. People who really kind of have to hold on to that label, truther, they have to say it. We in the truther community, us, we are the ones, we are the only ones who know of this truthful information. Other people might know a little bit about this, but we are the ones who are going to comprehend this Mandela effect, this simulation theory, these mud floods. We are the only ones that be very aware, stay cognizant of that type of mentality, and just use your discernment, because that's some old fucking snake oil salesman bullshit that has been used for centuries. It's obvious, and I don't trust it one bit, and it doesn't vibe with me. They're always selling something. And the point is with that, really, one of the big points is a lot of the people are selling a lot of that bullshit. Like, we're a team. We're a part of this world. We're the truther community. We need to, strive forth and go into this world and do all this other shit because, we're these people. A lot of the times they're doing that to distract from their not knowing who in the fuck they really are. They really don't know what's going on. So they have to, even in, not like what's going on in like, the world. No, what's going on with their own selves, with their own, with their own shit. So a lot of people who are insecure about their own lives, about something, a lot of people are insecure in one space. They have to over dramatize and overemphasize something else. So in the truth community, this is what's happening with a lot of these people are like, oh, we're super duper superhero truthers. And like us, we think like this and they think like that. And it's obvious. It's obvious you don't think like that. Because you were like one of those people. You were just like day before yesterday, you were the one watching, CNN and all that other shit and thinking like that inside. So what the fuck is really going on here? This is an artificial in-between waiting room game that people are playing. So like there's this whole thing. People want to connect all these different reactionary storylines, reactionary truths, to validate their in-between waiting room. They want to validate the time that it takes to take the actual responsibility to challenge themselves, to change themselves, to stop focusing on the reactionary truth and instead go internal. So the last video cut off, but it cut off on a perfect point on its own. I just wanted to summarize and end on this video what was cut off. To go on beyond that, after that point, take it back to what this really boils down to. This artificial truth that it's a synthetic truth. It's truth that is truthful, but we know you wouldn't have to call truth synthetic if it didn't have like another something attached to it. That's what I say. That's what I mean when I'm talking about artificial and synthetic truth. It's the same thing with kind of like artificial people. When you meet artificial people, they have something attached to them. They either want something from you or you, like they have like some kind of ulterior motive of some sort. They're not really showing up. They're not really there to be in the moment with you and then like team up to be whatever. There's something else there. And that something else is very similar to what I was saying, relates to the disconnect, or what this all boils down to in the so-called truth community. The disconnect between, or the difference between people who are connected to the land and or nature or the Most High, so on and so forth, and people who are disconnected from that, or the entities that are disconnected from that. Because this is some, like, I'm leaning more and more towards a lot of these bodies, a lot of these people that we see walking around are not like we're not the same. The hardware and the software is not the same. The way we think is not the same. Like, some people can only comprehend reactionary truth. Some people don't have any roots. Just think of it as like this. If people are like robots, or maybe like it could be kind of like a not like a Stockholm. What's that? What happens when you get like abused and you kind of don't you have these memories that you don't recall. So there's that happening to certain people, and then there's something that all the way back to the beginning of their own like creation, like their own, like, what is that? Like, wasn't it an experiment? Like, this is all stuff that's going on right now because there are genetic differences between us. And it manifests in the actions that we have, like in relation to nature, in relation to each other. And it's grown to a massive scale to where this so-called New World Order, it's not a New World Order. It's just a bunch of consciousnesses that have disconnected themselves from nature. It's a bunch of consciousnesses that don't give a fuck about the cycles of this reality and have only concerned themselves with their own, like, making their world as shiny as possible at the expense of not only people, but this realm itself, the earth itself, the experience itself. So it's just like taking advantage of all this and all the most beautiful thing, like the complex nature of humanity, the complex nature of a person, taking that and just using it for, you know, some bullshit, like some fucking, like working at McDonald's or something like that. That's what's happened to the human experience overall. So, like, this is what's happening in this truther community. And like I said, this is what it always boils down to. Like, there are going to be some people who are going to, you know, they're trying to create timelines right now that resort back only to civilization or to times that relate to fixing this system. Like I said, what kind of fucking there's nothing advanced about the colonial nature. There's nothing advanced about this. This is what these buildings. That's what I'm saying. Some of these videos are trying to compare the modern society, like this modern, like brick and mortar sort of square linear thinking. They're trying to compare this to the intricacies of the ancient peoples, like because there was a mud flood here and there, that they're the same. No, maybe eventually they became the same, and that's why it needed to be reset. If the Most High is, you know, saying, you know, this needs to be reset or whatever, but that doesn't make it equivalent. That doesn't make it equivalent at all. And the point is, like I said, that's a distraction from the point. That's another ancient aliens thing. It's like, oh yeah, they'll just theorize to the umpteenth degree. That's why everything is about theorizing. The whole truth community is about theorizing. It's a mere image of the heliocentric programming, the theory of evolution, the theory of the Big Bang, the theory of relativity, the theory, heliocentric theory. All these are theories. So the truth community is based upon a truth that is set in a reality, like a deeper truth than these illusions or these mind controls that are set up by the so-called powers that be. It's set in truth, but it's still based upon a certain level of consciousness that is in the same realm that those illusionists work in. It's still reactionary. You're not going to get to where you're going to empower yourself until you go beyond reacting to the alchemy of the individuals or the entities who started, you know, fucking with you in the first place. So we're not out of that yet. And I'm saying we, putting myself in this circle of, you know, people who call themselves the truth community, but I am not in that. I don't label it. It's people who call themselves in the truth community because they need it. They need that. If you're really talking about real truth, you don't need to always say you're in a fucking truth community. But people who always resort back to us in the truth community, us over here doing this, they need it. Because it's just like Alex Jones resorting back to 1776. That is their foundation. That is their timeline. They're creating a timeline. Instead of creating a timeline to a foundation based upon time, they're creating a foundation based upon truth. And that truth is not like deep ass truth. That truth is reactionary truth. So since they have a catalog, an entire resume, you know, years of vesting energy in reactionary truth, now they can call themselves, they can drop the reactionary truther and they can just call themselves a truther. And that's where we are today. People calling themselves truthers because they have 50% of truth at best. 50% of truth is the lie that is hiding the truth. So they only have the smallest of the percentile in the 50th percentile of truth. Not even like the actual truth of the truth of that 50th reactionary truth. They don't even have that. It's still theoretical. This is what mud floods is. So, or are. Same thing with the Mandela effect. All these things are just seeded. And then the point is, in all of these so-called truths, is that you're still waiting on the authorities of truth, which are the authorities of this world, to make their move, to tell you what is truth. And even if you're not so naive to be there now that you're really thinking for yourself and you're really about that, if you're not there, then you're still in the same space, because now when they make their move, what's your move? Your move is going to be based upon their next move. So you're still reacting to them. Point being, you could do that forever. I've been doing this with my videos on this channel. This is how I started to realize this consciousness, that this exists like this, because I was doing it. And I'm still doing it because it has a purpose to a degree. But this is also why I'm slowing down on doing it. Because you hit that point to where it's just like, all right, well, I'm kind of maxing out the capabilities of this type of frequency, this type of sharing. And now it needs to go into a more active sort of space. And this is why I'm moving more towards growing and creating community-based stuff right now. Because that's what it's always going to boil down to. We're talking about people who want to take over the world. We're talking about people who are killing people all over the world. Most people who are in this so-called truther community, or just talking about information, they don't want to take over the fucking world. So you don't really have to meet the individuals who want to take over the world at the level that they are. You just have to see where they are, knock the fucking foundations out of their legs, and go about your fucking business. That will be enough for them. Because they will, from the fall, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. From their fucking fall, the fall will kill them. But we're too busy trying to meet them at their level in their world, because a lot of us subconsciously and unconsciously are still trying to save that world because we like that world. A lot of us are still trying to save that shit. I'm not there. I'm not trying to I don't give a fuck about that world. But this is why a lot of the people, and one thing that keeps people from going to the depths of destroying that entire mentality and consciousness is Christianity and the Bible. And that whole relationship with flat earth in the truth community. This is another kind of heavy duty sort of, because why did they give the Bible to slaves? They wouldn't give anything to slaves to empower slaves. They gave the Bible to the slaves to empower the slave master, to make the slaves forgive the slaves, to desensitize the slaves to what's happening to them at the hand of the slave master. That shit still exists today, and exists in the truth community, so-called truther community, if you ask me. It exists today to do the same thing. So when people jump into the truth community, just the same way they jump into the New Age community, they jump into the truth community, they jump into flat earth, and they automatically go into, a lot of them because Christianity and jumping to the Bible, it's easy. Everything is written out for you. You can just default to that. All your answers are in the Bible. You don't have to ask any more questions anymore. You don't have to have any more responsibility anymore. All your answers are there. Anybody who goes against that is just against what is God's word. So you are forever on God's side because what? Because a book is there, because you're based upon you are born, you are more complex than that book. You have more capabilities than a book. So what that mentality of that book, that religious sort of mentality, control grid is meant to do is the same thing that this so-called truther community is doing. It's sucking people into a certain level of consciousness. And then when they get there, they will default when they reach that maximum capacity within that new level of consciousness. And when it becomes old, then they default to what's comfortable to them. So when they jump into flat earth, and flat earth as a whole, the information as a whole gets old, they default to the spiritual level of consciousness that's more, or the next level of consciousness that's beyond the physical observation of this stuff and the psychological. They jump into the spiritual, which is what is available to them in the flat earth community is Christianity and the Bible and that whole stuff like that. And I'm not saying the people do whatever do if you're gonna go into that, I'm not saying you're wrong for that. Just do it. Don't get so fucking personal about it is my whole point. Fucking people are gonna say shit about stuff all the fucking time. Who cares? Point being, there are traps set up. You have to understand that there are traps set up on purpose. Do you not think that there are going to be traps set up in a so-called truther community? Are there going to be traps set up in something as huge as the flat earth? Of course there are. Are there going to be traps set up in the conspiracy? Of course there are. You have to be the most naive fucking person in the world to not understand that there are going to be traps set up by the same consciousness who created this fucked up situation in the first place. So one of the most obvious traps that I'm seeing right now that's constantly being repeated is this reactionary so-called truth, which is just lies. It's not the depths of truth. It's just information. It's distractionary information. It's not truth anymore when it has a malevolent intent behind it. It no longer stands to be truth. You can't call it truth. If it maxes out at a certain level of consciousness that is designed to work against you, it's no longer truth. It's now become alchemy. It has an intention. It has a purpose to work in some way, not with you, against you. So all of these different truths out there, truth can work against you. So since truth can work against you, how can truth work against you? I've been going through a good amount of different reasons or ways how, just how I explained it with the whole truth community is one obvious one. It's just kind of like the general way of how it does work against us. And it's very sick in a sense to see this, like every day people vesting there and defending that shit, because it's just so cheap. It's fucking cheap. It really it shrinks us down to nothing. Like we're just these regular, like your soul. Okay, like a good example of what, and I'll end it on this. A good example of what I just explained on a personal kind of approach is, and I don't like using people as, I don't like resorting, even though I make those videos where I use people as examples, I really don't like using people as an example, but it works a lot of times, and if it works very well, really. But anyway, fuck it. The quantum of conscious dude, since they're very linear, these types of thinkers, it's mathematical. They think they can quantify the soul. That's what's going on here. The artificial-minded people, and I'm not calling them artificial intelligences or robots or anything. I'm saying that that's a possibility with some people, but not with, I'm not saying that, I'm putting that on anybody. What I'm saying is that the consciousness that is accessed is basically the same, because the relationship that you have to the Most High or the soul is, resorted down to simulation or a computer, some kind of hardware, software relationship that is, kind of like, okay, and I don't know if this cut off, I don't know if the video, it was cut off in the video, if I said it in this part of the video, but it was a good example of the Windows 98 and smartphone kind of reality that's existing right now. So we have the example, and I'll go quick just in case it was already said. What's happening is the people who don't really have the capacity, not like it's impossible, I don't know if it's impossible, but they don't really have the capacity to go beyond an artificial timeline. They can't go beyond a codependent timeline, like codependent on this colonial world, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. A good kind of analogy is to say, okay, well, what's happening is you have people who are so vested in the artificial world that they think real change is based upon software updates and hardware updates, but they're not really going beyond the computer software and hardware relationship with this experience. So what's happening right now in the truther community is that you have the truther community that's being controlled by the access of information and the flow, the velocity of information. This is being manipulated, and over time, people are developing this idea of what change really looks like. People who are thinking from a progressive sort of mentality, like a Bernie Sanders mentality, they're thinking on a level of fix the system, put a new politician in there, and everything will be better. They're not going to really change. That's going to benefit the system. So they're going to keep playing that card. So enter in TYT, Bernie Sanders, Rosario Dawson, Susan Sarandon, what's that dude's name? Killer Mike. You know, enter all these dudes, and then boom, you got one level of consciousness. You already got the mainstream media, the celebrities telling you to vote. Yeah, they already got that level of consciousness locked down, so that's good. Now they have another level of consciousness, the conspiracy level of consciousness. So that's locked down with Alex Jones. He channels all that into 1776. So that's his Windows 98. So TYT's Windows 98 is Bernie Sanders, and the mainstream media's Windows 98 is a new president, like a Democratic president, a president that's not a piece of shit. So they go from piece of shit president to not piece of shit president, and then they play in between, but they're really, you know, doing the same thing. So the Windows 98, in a sense that they want a factory reset. They don't want to they want to factory reset the consciousness of the people. They want to partition out truth. The truth community is just a corporate hardware, software partition, reset partition. For people to reset to what? To Windows 98, because that's comfortable for certain people, because they've been so used to the disconnected computer, hardware, software world. They've been disconnected from the world outside of hardware, software connections to this experience. So truth is being sold to the so-called truth community based upon factory resets to Windows 98. And they ain't going beyond that because they don't have the capacity to go beyond that, because their idea of truth has been based upon reaction. It hasn't been based upon reality. It's been based upon reacting to the so-called powers that be. And people don't know how to think. A lot of people don't know how to think outside of that realm or approach, because a lot of them, like I said, a lot of them want to protect. So whether they're doing it consciously or subconsciously, they want to protect this world. So they'll talk about the Windows XP version of truth. They'll talk about the Windows 7 and the Windows 10 version of truth. Hell, they'll even get into the MP3 player version of truth. They'll get into the earliest, the iPhone 4 version of truth and version of change. And you'll think it's really, smartphone versions of change? Smartphone versions of truth? Whoa. And then you got Windows 98 versions of truth? This is what I'm saying mud floods are. Mud floods are a Windows 98 version of truth. It's still reactionary. It still doesn't empower you. It only empowers you into a space of the same way that kind of like no trees on flat earth or no forest on flat earth empowers you. How does that empower you? Really? information wise, that's it. But it doesn't get activated until you do something with it. Until you have somewhere to put it. But you don't have anywhere to put that information or what to do with it. Mud floods is a power that you could wield. But if your power is only based upon change overall, if your macro power maxes out as at changing the system that's already put in place, you're not going to be able to change or do anything. Your truth is worthless. Your truth maxes out at Windows 98. Your factory reset version of change maxes out at their factory reset version of change. And I'll end on that because that is the example of this fake truther ass community. It's this version of change that will max out at what the so-called powers that be had already had in mind. They had already knew about mud floods. They already know about flat earth. They already know about weather manipulation. They already know about they already doing the lasers and the chemtrails and all this other stuff. The point is, and what it always boils down to, is what the fuck are you gonna do about it? And who the fuck are you? Then get into like how you can start moving the pieces around on the board. We haven't even opened up that door yet. Because their alchemy of distracting us has worked. It's been so efficient that we started calling ourselves a truther community. And you got these arrogant, prideful ass people who are out there talking about us in the truther community. We can look at, and I'm not saying that like I know there's people who are totally vesting their, attention spans and their whole like truth on, what comes from the Democrats and Republicans. I understand that world of consciousness, that the people who are basically like zombies. I understand that, but it becomes another world. It becomes another thing. When you start to identify yourself, when you start to label yourself as such, because you are doing another version of what the artificial synthetic consciousness zombies have been doing inadvertently. They've been doing it because they didn't know anything else to do. People in the truth community are becoming truthful zombies. This is what's happening in the truther community. They're becoming truthful zombies because they're filled with a wealth of information, but they're still defaulting to only changing the system and not activating their responsibility to do something with themselves in their own community, to come together, to find out who the fuck you are, to acknowledge what has happened. To acknowledge what has happened. See, they'll talk about mud floods flooding and show you all these pictures of mud floods flooding their cities. And that's why this is a big fucking deal for them. Because, this was, and I don't want to shrink it all the way down to that. I don't want to boil mud floods all the way down to that because that's not what it's, I don't think it's only that. Like I said, this being out there right now, the way it is, seems like a distractionary truth. Because it's just empty again. Obviously, they have been doing things to make things happen on a larger scale. Look at the fires. Look at the fires that have been happening all over the place. Look at Katrina. Look at the tsunamis. Okay, is it possible? Yes. Do I give the same entities that are doing that shit, do I give them the same power of, or it the same power of complete and utter and total, weather modification or earth modification? No, absolutely not. There's nothing in my intuition that says that's a reality. I just can't say that right now. Are there in between? Like I said, yeah, I think they can change the weather. They can make some clouds. They can fuck with hurricanes. They can probably create some earthquakes in certain areas. And like I said, and what I didn't mention in this video yet, which I wanted to mention, is that Like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. This connects, mud flood connects with, the waters above, waters below in many different kind of ways. Like I said, this is all circumstantial. Like, we're still theorizing right now. This also connects with the primary water source that Gaddafi was talking about in Libya. I haven't gone any further than that, but that was one of the first things that came to mind when I started watching these videos. Oh, the waters below. It also connects with the tunnels underground, the civilizations underground, the people that live underground, the whole different kinds of people. So you can connect that to the people, the relationships with that people have with nature above ground. The same. Is it different? Is it going to be different than the people in the relationship that people have with this reality that live underground? Of course it is. It's the same way. It's different that people have relationships with people who live, or the dolphins and the whales that live in the fucking ocean. It's going to be different. So is that difference going to be existing inside of their psyche? Yes. Inside their spirit? Yes. In many different ways. We don't know how, though. In one way that we do know how is that there is a definite type of people who don't give one fuck about their relationship to nature and instead want to live at the expense of nature and people. And those are the entities and the beings that are doing this shit right now. And humans are just kind of, the humans are just like the kindergarten version of it. They're just doing these so-called powers that be, they're just doing a kindergarten version. They're playing with their cheap magicians. At best, they can do the stuff that I mentioned in this video, but they're cheap. It's cheap, ultimately. And you got people reacting to cheap magic when their magic is has so much more potential. That's my whole point with all these videos. You focus all your energy and your so-called truth on the lies of cheap magicians. And you don't focus or even look into your own potential as a people and as an individual. We don't ever do that. And what I'm saying is that a lot of people don't want to do that because a lot of that is involved in the macro change that a lot of people don't want to see change. Because of many different reasons, personal and on a larger scale. So there are many different reasons why people are not focusing on that. And I don't know, and I wanted to emphasize this too. I don't know if this cut off too, but like I said before, as far as the default, people want to default. A lot of people are defaulting to certain things on purpose, and some people are defaulting to certain levels of consciousness or truth because it's the most comfortable level to do. So like I said in the video, which I hope was cut off, it didn't get cut off, was like, why did the slave master give us, or maybe I said in this video, the slave master, anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. I give too many examples of how different people are approaching this shit, but the people that I'm talking to right now, they know what I'm talking about. The slave master didn't give the Bible to slaves to empower them. They gave it to them to control them. They exist the same way today. So when people get into the truth community, they're going to default to what's comfortable for them. So people are going to get into the truth community or the flat earth community, and they default to Christianity because that's all over YouTube. It's all over flat earth. And then, their grandmothers and their parents, and they're going to have a closer relationship with their parents now because they're connected with their parents on flat earth and, Christianity or the Bible or something like that. And that's exactly what this cheap ass magic, fake artificial version of spirit and ancestral connections wants you to do. It wants you to have like a new age, by the book version of spirit. It's linear, it's cheap, and it's in this computer, hardware, software, program version of truth and connection with this reality. Like I said, everybody obviously very generally speaking, everybody talking about this reactionary truth and taking some kind of pride in it, calling themselves like getting soul tokens. That's why I was talking about this linear shit about linear truth, like linearizing the soul. Like people are saying, oh, because I'm doing this truthful stuff, I'm getting soul tokens. Ha 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 ha. Like I'm getting soul tokens. Other zombies out there aren't getting soul tokens. It's still comparison to, and then it's bullshit. This whole, you can't shrink the soul down to, you can't shrink the experience down to like this fucking simple, and that's what's been happening. That's what certain people have to do to comprehend, get a grasp of this reality. It's a fucking waste of time a lot of the times. If you find another way to get what you're doing and learn what you're learning, then don't follow these assholes who are just out there talking about soul tokens and just linear, just shrinking down, watering down what's going in your potential to fucking a computer graphic quantum reality. Don't give them that. They're just shitting all over the ancestors on purpose. They're shitting all over everything on purpose. Everything that predates, all of that, because they're trying to factory reset to Windows 98 because that's what's comfortable for them. And am I saying that's what can only be comfortable for them? No. It's not. I don't know that for sure. Maybe it is. I don't know. But point is, that's what's happening right now on that scale. And the people on the YouTube talking about they know what's going on. It's ridiculous. It's one level of consciousness. So I lost my train of thought on what I was talking about as far as was it the hardware software reset? Yeah. So once you start challenging yourself to predate the factory reset refurbished truth to Windows 98 so you can work your way back. Once you get over that shit, that's when you can start going into asking the questions of how and why, and start taking a responsibility for change and what's really going on. Beyond that, you know, we're going to be spinning wheels, and the whole point, like what I'm saying, is that's the whole point that this malevolent consciousness wants us to do. Spin your wheels in reacting to their world. As long as you're reacting to their world, as long as your truth is based upon their world, and let's just say that it's an artificial intelligence. As long as your focus is on their world, then they remain powerful. And you remain powerless because you are not empowering yourself. So you're twice powerless. You're empowering them and you're not empowering yourself. You're actually 3 times powerless because you can go beyond that once you start empowering yourself. You can start attacking the spaces beyond their scope of attack against you. So that's another capability that you're missing out after you find your own anchor points. Well, we haven't even gone into that world yet because we think that our truth is based upon their truth. They're reacting to that because that's what the commercial TV of today is telling us. YouTube is the TV of today. The TV is telling us to focus on, just like back in the 60s, the truther community of that time told you to think that we landed on the moon. And for people who didn't, believe in that, they were the truther community at that time, and then they just got overridden. The power, it was just too, like, the consciousness of the people was too low, and the power of that alchemy at that time was so high that even the people who were saying that, that's bullshit, we didn't go to the moon, they're faking, they're lying, at that time, there wasn't enough. But now you have the networking capacity and the amount of people who can do it. But the same thing, it's going to resort down to the people, the consciousness of the people. Are they going to be equipped to handle this information, or even handle the ability to think about this information? Largely, no. But we still have to push the limits all the time and see what's going on. But you see, one of the side effects to this access, this over the abundance of information, is people now taking a pride of this information, not going to the depths, and only going to And now building their own corporation of truth, their own corporation of reality, and saying, well, now since the so-called powers that be could theorize about this reality, now I'm just going to theorize about this reality. And if they could just maybe forever, then I can just maybe this world forever. And like I said, what are they doing? They're taking a shit on all of your ancestors and saying it doesn't even matter. They're trying to rewrite the wheel. For what? Because maybe, like what I bring a lot of the times, because a lot of them don't have any foundations. And if they do, they're foundations that they don't want to look at. They don't want to change. They don't want to access that information because it's too painful. Like I said, maybe it's abusive. Maybe it's like, I don't know. It's a lot of things that are there. Point is, it's there. So I'll leave it there because this video is probably going to cut off again pretty soon. But I think I caught up to where I missed out on. But like I said, I just wanted to focus on mud floods is just another version of a thing that happened. So what does that thing mean? Like, if you're focused on like an Alex Jones type of approach, then you're going to automatically say the globalists did this. This is a globalist mechanism that they've had since however long that they've used to reset the civilizations so they can start over from their own empire. But then again, like you're saying, like I was saying before, mud floods on that scale, like the pictures that they were showing, they only give a fuck about those colonial buildings. They're still not talking about the actual land those buildings were built upon. One thing I didn't say before that was said in the last video that was cut off was, and to add on top of that, was the story of the mound builders. And from where I'm from, from where the mound builders are in Oakland, California, in the Bay Area. There's mounds all over the bay, and the mounds were actually burial grounds. And one of the burial grounds for the Ohlone people in the Bay Area was centered right in Emeryville, right, which is an offskirt connected like in the heart of Oakland, right on the water. Then one of the mounds was built right there, and they built their mound right there. They used to build the mounds with empty or shells and oyster shells and clam shells, and they used to bury their ancestors there. They used to bury them, and this, in particular, this mound raised to become 2 feet 2 stories tall and a city block long. And what these colonizers or disconnectors from the land did when they came here, because like I said before, if we, the indigenous people, saw mud floods happening, we just up our stuff and move to the side and say, okay, well, you know, the Most High, nature's doing its thing the same way floods and rains and fires and shit happens from lightning or whatever happen. That shit happens. So we just, move on. The only reason why this is affecting certain people is because they're like, oh, our civilization's right. Yeah, okay. But then that just adds to the case of the Most High doing this. If this goes back, that means, like, possibly. And then you get into the watchers and I don't want to go into there right now. We can with certain people. We could spitball with certain people and go there eventually. But right now, I want to focus more on what's going on with the whole, how the hell, these disconnectors from the land came to this land. Like, I don't know if I finished it because it cut off real quick, but if we saw it, we just up and move, be nature, blah, blah, it wouldn't be a big deal. We'd still go on about our relationship with this reality. We'd still go on about our relationship, spiritual relationship with each other. See, the people who are focusing on this mud flood shit in their precious little fucking buildings with antennas on them being covered up, are not really looking and giving any really credit to the spiritual technology that we were tapped into. And I don't know if this was cut off too in the last video, but maybe this is why the spiritual people in Machu Picchu, or in Peru, in Machu Picchu, built Machu Picchu up on a big ass land, a big ass mountain, so it wouldn't be covered in mud floods. And what were they building up there to tell you? Well, when you get up there to see what they were building a spiritual connection. Something beyond this brick and mortar bullshit. They were telling you there's something more here. But the people who are focusing on this reactionary truth, they don't have any comprehension of what something more actually means. So they need to constantly fill themselves up with another reactionary truth, another physical, another thing that validates their version, their types of truth. Things are types of truth. These things, Mandela effect. The new Mandela effect is a good example because it's like a micro macro version, because you get new Mandela effects. That's like new truths in the truth community. So either the Mandela effect community, or they call themselves a Mandela affected. See, this is this other labelist community thing that's happening that people need this shit. You don't need this shit. But people in this world of, on their own, trying to figure it out on their own, they need that shit. So what I'm saying is that overall, not to come down on them, because I was in that same space. The point is to make people aware of this, because it's a trap. It's an actual trap. You will trap yourself in those spaces, and eventually you will start to defend them. Like people defend Christianity, the Bible, religions, and all that other stuff. They'll start to defend it because they have now adopted a belief system. All that stuff is a belief. You believe in a book, you believe in Christianity, you believe in religions. These are all beliefs. And what's happening in the New Age community is, because this is an in-between thing that's happening now with people like Russell Brand. I didn't even get to watch the whole thing. I got to the first thing that was said in one of Russell Brand's latest podcasts or interviews he was doing with a young lady. Not young lady, she's like kind of politician sort of lady. I started watching it. First thing he says, do you believe in God? And then she says, of course I believe in God. So yeah, we're on the same page. But what kind of fucking program is that already? You're already setting up in like Windows 98 connection with the so-called, with the Most High you call God. And then because you're saying the belief. And I know he's talking to a certain demographic of people who still deal in belief. I'm not talking to those people. The people I'm talking about know what I'm talking about. If you have we have a relationship with the Most High. See, the New Age people and these religious people, they don't have that relationship. They have a belief in God. They don't have, and see, even in so-called new truther communities and the New Age community, that's a consciousness. That's a level of consciousness that's different from an actual relationship. See, our ancestors had relationships with the Most High. This new sort of antennas on buildings, colonial buildings bullshit, this is the type of truth and consciousness for people who merely have a belief in God. They don't want to go any further than that. And if they do, they don't want to go because the mainstream version of truth, the mainstream wave of change and truth is not going to go any further than that. So they want to be a part of this. So this ties into the whole flat earth world and community that is just like pandering to the mainstream media. All and people know who've been in and around flat earth talks know what I'm talking about. There's people in the flat earth community, so-called flat earth community, that only care about the mainstream media acknowledging them and, how they acknowledge, the information and stuff like that. So they're still like focusing only on them. They have no real actual kind of like will. They have no like guided or conscious will to move forward. It's all forward momentum based upon the system, reactionary programs from the system. So yeah, they're talking about a huge truth, but what is it dialed into? Nothing. Emptiness. It's not going to move. So, that's happening on every version of so-called truth. But did I finish the hell I was going to say? I don't know if I finished what I was saying. Oh, the shell melts. Okay, so the video keeps cutting off. Excuse me. Video keeps cutting off. So I'll end this, like, closing out the shell mount talk. Because that's really what it really boils down to, this whole truther discussion. We're talking about people who are connected with nature and spirit and the soul, and people who are not. Like, there are beings who are not. And then there are people in between, which is the vast majority of people who don't know what, they're just kind of innocent in it all. And then you got people who are calling themselves truthers, who are actually defending the truth of the so-called truth. They're defending the alchemy, largely unknowingly defending the alchemy of the people who are disconnected from the spiritual reality. They're defending it because they don't know, and largely a lot of them want to protect it. So this is what I'm saying is what's happening with the people who are here and still here, and because like people, a lot of people are hopeless, and they want their truth just to be like, well, let's just make things better than, because it's so bad, we should just make things better. But they're still reactionary. You're not going to the depths of your responsibility of activating who and what you are through your ancestral storyline. It matters. Just because you have a soul doesn't mean the body doesn't matter. Just because you have a mind doesn't mean the body and your culture and your people, your relationship here doesn't matter. We're just not. Just because, like, your soul means something, but your body and your people, your culture, your dances, your alchemy, your style, it might not be yours, like ownership from a soul perspective, but it'd be totally egotistical and kind of childish to say it doesn't matter. Like, just because, why? Because you have an arrogant sort of, the soul is the only thing that matters? That's what's happening right now in the New Age community. People are saying, we have a soul. And then people are not even saying that. Or we are a soul and the body doesn't matter. So people are saying that. People are not even going that far. People are saying, we are from other galaxies, so this reality doesn't matter. Your culture, your stuff, your ethnicity, your alchemy of your ancestors, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because there are, pyramids on Mars. There's aliens that are benevolent aliens in the Andromeda galaxy. There are benevolent extraterrestrial entities that come through channeling. That's what people are believing. This is another belief system reality now. That, like I said, people who are trying to rewrite the wheel, a lot of them, because they don't. A lot of them are trying to rewrite it because they don't have the connections to the original writers of the original creators of the wheel. So they have to generate this extraterrestrial version of the wheel and then say that that's the original wheel. This is what's happening with simulation theory and this whole, like, soul token world, that people are thinking that it's just a linear interpretation of what the soul is and a linear interpretation of this experience is. And that's what people who are only equipped to do that do. They just say, oh, well, they water it down. They make it their own. This is what's happened. This is what happened with Western civilization in history. They didn't know what the fuck to do with our spiritual technology. So they dumbed the entire consciousness down to just accept this kindergarten version of reality. And now, since the kindergarten version of reality has lasted for so long, people are saying that the kindergarten version of reality is equivalent to what the ancestors' versions of reality were. And it's totally absurd and actually a slap in the face to our ancestors. This is why I speak as I do in reference to the truth community. So like I said, that's the intricate version of what I was saying is what happened back in the day. I was like the early 1800s when the disconnected from nature consciousness people showed up to the Bay Area, to the burial ground. They cut that burial ground because there were mound builders. They built their shells and they built their mounds out of old shells. So there was like a gathering place, and there was their burial. They hung out with their ancestors, or they used it. They just cast their shells. Eventually, point being, it was a burial ground. They buried their ancestors where they put their shells from their oysters and clams from when they just like would chill out in that area. And this burial ground became 2 stories tall and a city block long. And there were mounds like this all over the place. This was the biggest one in that area. That mound was cut down cut and flattened out, and they literally built a dance pavilion on top of that mound. This is what this consciousness did. So this is different than the mud flood discussion, because the mud flood discussion still can be connected to a natural relationship, the people's connection with nature or spirit or what's going on here. The other connection is like the flood of the mud flood of colonizers, the mud flood of disconnected from spirit consciousness. That's the main thing that matters right now. You're seeing all these, people trying to, glorify the colonial connections as if it was some what? You think because they got antennas on their buildings, there's some kind of advanced civilization? I actually heard that in one of these videos. It's kind of absurd, really. But that's what it looks like what they're attempting to do. It's not the same. And what it really boils down to is like what I said, people were connected with nature and people are disconnected with nature. You're still looking at buildings from people who are disconnected with nature and disconnected with spirit, period. So even beyond this is what happened when the people mud floods came in. It's the same thing. This is more of a real certified truth. The mud flood of colonizers that came in, that's more of a focus to really address, because this is the reality that's happening today. People are disconnected with spirit, actual people, actual consciousness, actual events that happened that lead up to today. So you have these people, these beings who don't give a fuck about spirit, who don't give a fuck about nature, who don't give a fuck about the people who are connected with spirit and nature, and they built their empire on top of your burial grounds, your ancestors. And the people who are talking about mud floods, like I said, these buildings are built on top of what? On top of ancient burial grounds. And you still ain't talking about that because you just want to talk about the distractionary mud floods or Mandela affected shit or simulations or fucking infinite planes or domes. Whatever it is, you're not empowering yourself, which is the whole point. And like to finish off that story and finish off this video for like the 4th time now. Later on down the line, when that dance pavilion on that burial ground was out of style, they abandoned it. And then eventually they came back and built a Sherwin-Williams on top of it. For those who don't know, Sherwin-Williams is a paint company, one of the biggest ones all over the world. And their icon or whatever it is, their symbol is a globe earth covered in red paint. Almost looks like blood. So in this case, this is literally what happened. They seeped that toxic chemical, since they were right by the bay. What do you think they did with their toxic chemicals? They dumped it right in the bay. It's like the 1900s or some shit, late 1800s, 1900s. So they just dumped their chemicals in the bay. What they did was they dumped those chemicals through the bones and the artifacts of the people, of the ancestors. So what they did was they took their university people in there, the people that make you think that they're benevolent. They're so-called excavators. They excavated the bones and the artifacts, took the artifacts to the school, told you they were studying it. They're not, they're just hiding it. Took some of the bones, took the other bones, which is the majority, like 80% of the bones. So I can't remember, don't quote me on that percentage, but the majority of the bones there were turned into rubber because of those toxic chemicals. So the bones of your ancestors were turned into rubber. And they were orange, bright orange. Because of this consciousness, because of this mentality. They just threw those bones in the dump. They threw the artifacts in the dump. They continued to build their IKEA. They continued to build their AMC theaters. They continued to build their Mac and their Elephant Bar and their Banana Republic and their PF Chang's and their Old Navy and their Victoria's Secrets and their Gaps and their Popcornologies and all their other fucking shits that were there. And their rotating Halloween store right on top of the burial grounds of the Ohlone people. On top of the old dance pavilion that they were dancing on top of the bones. So this is the new version of dancing on the graves of the indigenous people. And the new version of this is the internet version of dancing on the graves, is when they create all these stories to distract you from those stories existing. Those bones that are still buried underneath the White House, that are buried underneath these city halls. Where do you think these colonizers built their cities when they conquered their lands? They built them right on top of the old places they conquered because they were already excavated, they were already flattened, they were already created farmland. So they took over the areas that were already populated with the indigenous people, and they just built their buildings that you're looking at right on top of it. And ooh, a mud flood just comes out of nowhere and just washes it away. Oh, maybe it's the cabal who did it. Maybe it's the Illuminati. Maybe it's the Most High telling you to get your fucking head out of your ass and connect with this fucking reality and stop being pieces of shit. Maybe it's that. That's another possibility. I'm just throwing this shit out there. You can do whatever it is that you're going to do, and people are going to do that anyway. What I'm saying is that don't start following all these next theories upon theories. These are just the next fucking distraction that's out there. I've been saying this for the last 3 years now. I said this 3 years ago about flat earth. The same thing about Mandela effect. One of the first videos that I did 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago. It was like a year into flat earth when I started to see, I saw a year's worth or however long worth of people just being distracted by this shit, by flat earth. And they're not really going to the point. I'm like, look how this information is distracting us from our dreams, from our consciousness, from our relationships, from our ancestors, from our power. This is what this stuff is distracting us from the real truth. It's funny how ironic that truth is distracting you from truth. But wouldn't that be the best weapon against a deeper truth? What's the best weapon against deeper truths? Shallow truths. So that's what's happening right now. Glad I finally got that Shell Mound story out there. I've said it a few times on this channel, but that's a big deal, and it's just an example of what's been happening on a larger scale that people in the so-called truth community are still avoiding for whatever reason. Eventually, when one person that has, some kind of push or some kind of influence around, when one person mentions it, then somebody else will mention it. I'm just a little YouTube channel over here, but my strength, my power isn't based upon the numbers on this bullshit ass fucking platform or any of them. It's focused on the content and the information, all the information. My intentions are known from the people who can feel my intentions. Give a fuck about any of that other, so what, personal opinions and all that other bullshit. Everybody gonna have their personal opinion. Not just like I'm sharing my personal. I know this is still an opinion. I'm still spitballing just like anybody else. But this makes a lot of sense, and I've been mentioning this. I've been spitballing. You can call this an opinion, but this has been in a theoretical, this has been an opinion that I've been showing proof of for the last fucking 3 years. At least. Like hardcore through this truth community, whatever truth community. It's all deflective, distractionary bullshit. Because you're never going to be able to empower yourself if you're constantly focusing on the reactionary distractions of so-called powers that be that use that alchemy to control you. That's basically it. So on that note, I'll leave it. And until next time, from our relations, thank you for the support. And peace. And like I said, oh shit. Fuck it. This is exhausting sometime. And I'm still fasting, so I'm good though. I'll do a video sometime later on about an update on the fast. But yeah, until next time, from all my relations, peace, love, and harmony.